Evening all, welcome to Really Love Guitars again, and we're in the typical British summertime now, with still a lot of light around but raining and grey and stuff. So we've got George's Epiphone. It's an EJ, it's not a J200, it's an EJ200. Probably E means the electronic bit, which doesn't have a battery in it right now. We probably could find one to test it if we need to. So this is an interesting one. It's one of two guitars to come down together. Tim's Mark Knopfler has come down, and his son George's Epiphone. So I'm doing the Epiphone tonight, the Mark Knopfler tomorrow night or evening, and the day after, George is coming by with his girlfriend to collect both. So off camera, I had a chance to have a look at this guitar, and it came down with a sort of with Tim's description of how it felt to play, and they both felt like something. The description was the E string had sunk lower or something, and it was zinging out or buzzing or something like that. So it's difficult. All of that kind of thing is difficult to assess. So obviously the words, somebody's words is a good start point, but it's not always easy to match up the experience of the guitar to those words. And interestingly, I sometimes think that when as a tech you speak to the customer and say, well, I'm not sure I found that, and the customer can feel a little put out, or you know, you're saying I'm imagining it, or have I got it wrong, and actually it's just a matter of wording. There's something changed, and that's given. And my job is to not really worry too much about what it's described as, but to make sure that I put it right. So overall examination of this guitar shows, first of all, for a year-old EJ200, I call it a J200, but for a year-old J200-ish, it's actually in pretty good shape, and there's no visible deformation of the structure of the guitar, which you might say, well, you wouldn't expect that of a good brand within a year of purchase. But actually, that isn't a given, unfortunately. I've seen new guitars that have got too high an action already, with no more room in the saddle for any, for you to rectify it, and so on and so on, any adjustment. So it's not a given that a new-ish guitar is in good shape, because sometimes, before you know it, the neck has already sunk in a little bit, and you've got rising action and nowhere to correct it. But this one is in good shape, and it has a little bit, I have to say, there is a little something, and I don't know if you can see this, and this is, you probably can't see it. Yeah, you might be able to see that from here. You can see how the neck bends here, which is a sort of interesting thing. And there is what appears to be, am I imagining this? There's that's the edge, which is a join, that's fine. There's a little bit of what looks like resin. I could be just imagining this. It's maybe paint or something. Sorry about this, I'm trying to get a better look. I don't know what's happened there. There's a little something. It feels like it's been, maybe it's just a little bit of clumsy finish in the joins, and I don't quite know how you get the colour in there. You'd have to scrape it back, and maybe, but we do have a small breakage right there on the join, and that could be because of this slightly sinking angle. It's really interesting. Now you can possibly see it there. It dips away, and that's the first thing I saw about it from the side. Now, it's not the end of the world playability wise, but it does make me kind of wonder why it's got that strange, it's not a hump exactly, it's a flattening off as we get here. So this technically, you could argue that that's as near as down it will be parallel to the top. Actually, let's have a look. It's not very good. It is actually pushing in a little bit. It's not very good, very scientific method to prove it, but let's just try. Hold it. Okay, so now you know, you can see I can turn this round, and whichever way I turn it, look at the white binding on the top there, and that shows you that the binding at this point is sinking in relative to the neck binding is sinking down relative to the edge binding. If we take this bit as flat as can be, I mean, for example, this could be rising for all I know. But you can see that it appears to be confirming what we can see with our eye, which is that the fingerboard extension is twisting a little bit, bending a little bit at that point, and that's confirmed by this little mark here, this little crack. And it's not just a crack in the finish, that's going to be a crack in the, I think it looks like a crack in the actual binding. So that tells me quite a bit, and it's cracking under that body joint fret, which is in this crack would be in line with the tang. So there is something weird about this, and actually when I look at it, this is another way to look at it. Sorry, let's kind of look at it from where I can see it right now. Can you see we've got a little bit of action there? As you can see, the string of the Lucozade can. It's still there, you can still see the string, still see the string, still see the string. But at this point, can you see how it's like at this point the fingerboard rises up or something, looking at this edge, right? So the white binding becomes less visible and then it becomes more visible, and you can see the gap opening up there. Now of course it's going to open up a bit because it's going to this end, but there's something about this part of the fingerboard which is just not perfect. But having said that, you know, it's what it is, and there's no the only, you know, if you were trying to fix it in inverted commas, the only thing you could do really would be defret it and plane this hump out, or radius the hump out of it. But sorry, not the hump. I'm calling this a hump because it changes direction. So as you can see, without trying to be hysterical, and I don't mean to freak you out, George, because it's not that bad, but it obviously, there's the structure, calling it as flat as we can be, and it comes up to the fingerboard edge, comes up to here like that, and then it goes, whoops, let's try this again, not very good, sorry, let's do that to there, so it comes up to there, and then it goes kind of like that, is what I'm trying to get at. So it's travelling up in one direction, but what I call the hump, it's not really a hump, it's just a change of direction. From that way it goes, that side it goes one way, and from this side it goes another way, and there's clearly an angle right down there, a slight angle. So it suggests to me that this extension here is probably pressing in a little bit. What we've got is, if you think about it, you've got rotation, you've got two kind of forces. You've got one pulling this way, cramming this structure into the side of the thingy, but you've also got a sort of component of that force which is probably trying to pull, trying to rotate the headstock, if you like, towards, well, it's pulling it towards there, but if it can't go that way, it's also going to try and pull it up. So normally what you tend to find is that the whole, so I'll try and draw it here, in my limited experience, not my most huge experience, but I think what tends to happen is you've got the box structure there, and then as these two forces pull, you seem to sometimes get something that goes like, let's try and do this, ends up going like this, if you get what I mean. And so what happens is, of course, as a result of that, it's obviously not as extreme, but your action then kind of becomes a really high action all the way across there to the bridge, if I can get a line. And that's what quite often, it's that increasing space that we often, oh no, where's the bloody thing gone? Oh, shitty piss. Sorry. I'm sorry, I have no idea what happened there. We seem to have be stuck from memory or something. Yeah, so I was describing the things that tend to happen with with acoustic guitars, and so that's not happening on this guitar. The action is still good, but we're getting this weird little bit where, for some reason, it's as if this is going. Let's put the forces in. This is sort of going down a bit here, and this is presumably, this means this is sort of deforming just slightly, like so, but this bit isn't going upwards, which is kind of unusual. It's as if there's a force pulling down a bit on this, which I've no idea why that's happening. Anyway, sorry if we lost all of that explanation beforehand. So just looking at the measurements I made before we started, one of the things that Tim had kind of thought was whether the first fret action was too low, and I measured it. I didn't think it was, and it didn't strike me as too low when I played it, and I measured it, and we had high E, first fret, 0.5 mils, 0.5 mils, 0.5 mils, D, 0.3, 0.3, 0.5. And my target would be 0.3 all the way across, which I've actually done in the meantime with the files. And one of the reasons I'm doing is I'm starting off by trying to make this bone nut work perfectly. It was before I did the height and the widening with those files, because it was pinging and gripping the strings. But if it's perfect, because the nearest nut I could get from Tusk anywhere is not quite as fat as this one, so it would leave a little gap, which I don't like. So I'm kind of contemplating, obviously not charging for it, but not fitting it, because it's just a whiff too thin. It won't do any harm, but it would just leave a gap. And actually I'm going to treat this as if it's pretty much perfect now, which it is actually, and it's not an issue. Now, what is an issue on this guitar, apart from that strange shape thing here, which I did see the other night, but I wasn't really sure until I kind of got a good look down it on the bench. But what else is up with this guitar? I think Tim had said that his experience was that it was choking out, or beginning to choke out, and when I played it, I think I got some notes in that when I was playing it that felt like they were just on the edge of choking, so or just zizzing a little bit. So the one thing I can tell you about this is that it is a pretty low action. The thing is, it's probably slightly now deceptive, because if you measure the action here, which I normally do, what you'll actually find is that the action down here is probably a little bit lower again, well, relatively speaking, lower than if it was as if the neck didn't have this flattening off part here. So I'm cautious now, because whatever I measure there, if I say to myself, as I have done, the action there is 1.9, and we could go to 1.5 and blah blah blah. There's my calculations for reducing the saddle, of which there's plenty of room. It's already low, but George wanted it a bit lower still, and that's possible. Except I've got to be very careful, because this is deceptive, and if I take it down to all that way down there, this is going to be lower and lower as we go. So we shall see what's the best approach. Now, I've done the most of the adjusting of the string slots, so if they go down here, it can still tolerate a tiny little bit of lowering at the far end, if we do any. But that's not even the main issue with this guitar in a way. It's when I looked very close at the frets, and I don't think we're going to be able to show you this possibly in this lighting condition. Well, maybe you can. You see that fret has got scars along the top of it, and at the end, you'll see it's got some bigger scars, and almost every one of the frets has got those big scars at the end, almost the same In fact, it looks like the same thing. 2, sorry, my hand is holding this thing. There's 1, 2, gap, 1, 2. 1, 2, gap, 1, big gap, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, gap, 1, 2. So there's something about that on every end of every fret that's, damaged. But up close, almost all of these frets have got some amount of this surface damage, which makes them, sorry, there you go, that's a good example, makes them unpleasant to play. Look at that. So this is a bit of a funny one for me, so I'm kind of thinking, right, let's go back, let's do a sensible thing first. Let us make this play, first of all, the way it should play. So I'm not going to do any lowering yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do the start with the fret leveling, because normally, unless you set a very low action on an acoustic, it won't normally need fret leveling. However, this is completely different because of this damage all over the frets. You can feel it everywhere. Some damage on most of the frets. Because of this damage, I think doing the fret level is the first most significant thing to improve the playability of this guitar. Second thing is get that nut right so it's not pinching and the first fret actions are right, which I'm pretty much there. And then the next bit after that is if there's scope for a very small improvement in the last fret or the playing action this way, but having to really consider it as we go over there. Now the only downside for me is because I don't normally work off there, I don't have it in the top of my brain what the measurements would be there in relation to what they are there. I suppose, yeah, I mean, in other words, I don't know what I don't have in my mind a target action for here, which I know is acceptable and or extremely low or whatever the choice might be. So I'm still working really off the end here, but I have to just do it with the knowledge that whatever I do here is actually going to take it a bit lower. So if I think we can go 6, I might be better off going 0.3 and half that, just to be conservative, just to make a small improvement but not overburden it down here. So that's what I'm going to do. So it's a complete turnaround really, and it's mainly from coming across this change of shape in the neck and checking that actually it's not the first fret action that's causing this to buzz or thing. I think because it's so low there are uneven frets under here which are beginning to interfere with play. And it's a beautiful sounding guitar. That's even with old strings. You know this. Beautiful sounding. So I don't think there's much badly wrong with it, but rule number 1, I'm going to get rid of this scratchy rubbish that's happened to these frets somehow. Very light, careful leveling. Then I'm going to see whether that tidies up that thing. That's caused by there not being enough room, and it's caused by uneven frets here and the combined with the low action. And once I've done that, then we'll see what else we can do. So oddly enough, we're going to just begin by slacking the strings off and marking up the frets for leveling. Like I say, I'm erring on the side of keeping the original nut. Bone is not a bad material at all for nuts. I just typically prefer, whenever I can, to use Tusk, but I've been struggling in the Tusk catalogue to find good replacements. Tusk make a lot of nuts, or Graph Tech make a lot of nuts, but they don't cover everything, and you'd be amazed. You can't just go to Graph Tech and say, can I, oops, I don't know what you can see, can I have a Epiphone EJ200 compatible nut, because you just won't find it. So you have to start with the E to E measurement of the strings, then you have to take note of the thickness, the height, and the side-to-side width, and all of that. So you have to go through the catalogue looking for the best combination of all of those things, because I promise you, you won't get one nut that covers them all, which you'd hope to do, thinking to yourself, why doesn't Epiphone have a standard nut that fits all of these? Well, they might do, and you might find that it's a standard, or it's a bone one, but hoping for Tusk, that was the nearest I was able to find that was either available or on sale anywhere. But unfortunately, we could still fit it. It's just a little bit smaller, thinner than I'd want. So I am going to not do it for now. And while I'm putting grime, I need the gloves. While I'm sorting out the level the frets on here, and this will be telling as well, because the beam will tell us all I need to know. Yeah, we'll see what we can do. Oh, let me just check something before I do that. Hold fire. All tension off. Let me just check, quick look down the... Yeah, it's still got the same shape. That's kind of hard wired now. So... hard wired. So we have to live with it. Now what I will check in a minute is how it is on the other side of that binding. The G string looks like it's going to break here, but only if we can get the fret leveling done out of it. That'll be good. Okay, we'll call that fair enough, close enough to tension. It's very close. And now we'll get the precision leveling technique up and running. Like I say, the only reason I don't normally fret level acoustics is that typically I would take an acoustic down. If a player wants a very low action, I would only go down to 2 millimeters a low E, usually about 2.2 millimeters low E last fret, and even at 2, you don't, almost never, I barely ever found myself needing to level the frets. But if you go down below that, which we might here, we're probably just at that or below here because of this tailing off. Now the tailing off is going to be an interesting one from the point of view of leveling. So we've now got these, careful, we've got these two planes. We've got this plane here, and I'm going to concentrate on that damage to the end of these frets. Oh, before I do any more, let me just check on this side. Have we got, no, we don't have a split on this side of the fingerboard, so that hasn't broken the binding there. So that's interesting. Yeah, so we got one plane here, which is this one, and like I say, I'm going to concentrate on getting rid of those dings everywhere that I can, but also concentrate on checking where this tool runs up to and over the playing. Now, first thing it tells me is we've got a combination of high and low things going on, which is always interesting. So we're not touching these last 4 frets at all because they are on the far side of the hump. Actually, it is interestingly touching these 3, so they're not completely out of range, but by the time it gets down to these 4, it's at least not touching them. So they're kind of sliding away underneath the profile that we're looking for. We've got quite a bit cutting on the 2nd fret on the high E track. It's not cutting at all on the 3rd, tiny bit on the 4th, none on the 5th, none on the 6th, none on the 7th. So we've got basically high here, low here, normal here up to the join, and then a tail off. So we've got 2 significant areas of low frets on this guitar, obviously bounded by high frets, which are going to cause the problem. So the only thing we can do is we can gently look to not only just even these out a little bit, but we've also got to keep in mind this edge damage that we've got to take care of. Now, I think the edge damage is probably the less critical of the types of damage on these frets. In other words, it only extends, or those scratches are right at the edge, and they're different scratches further in. So I think the ones that affect play most are the ones in the body of the fret. So I'm not going to get over obsessed by the ones at the edge unless we catch them. So now this is the interesting bit. We don't have this in range, this part out here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to cheat, and I'm going to lift up slightly the bar, the tool, so I can actually level these frets on their little slope. So I've given them a little help, hopefully, to ease out this unevenness. Although so far it's not making a distinct problem. Now the first thing I'm going to care about right now as we put the string back in is to check that the string plays. Okay, so the great thing about this method is leveling method is I don't have to go down as long as the note plays at at the target action. Well, this isn't quite the target action, but it is for the time being. I don't want to lower this any further if it's not going to bear it. So I'm going to level it for the action we've got first. It's going to take a bit longer, because I might have to come back and level a second time if I lower it at all, but at least by doing this now I'll find out how close it is to nice playing, and if it's only a minor bit of leveling, then I can afford to do a little bit more for that extra tiny bit of lowering which George has asked for. But I have to say this is a very beginning, starts out as a low action, meaning it's just very easy to play this guitar. So again, I'm just running across the B track, as we call it, and I'm seeing what I know is actually that's evened out there. There's no built-in low spot, but there is one there and here. So around here is still low. That's actually what we had before, but it's not as bad now. It's evening out. But we've got a low spot there for sure, the 7th fret, and of course we've got the little end spot up there as well. Which I'll just sort of, we don't really need to pay that too much attention, and in some ways it would be better to just kind of focus on the bit where the 2 planes join, as opposed to going deliberately leaning over that join, because in some ways we can use the banana fret leveling tool to slightly ease off that something congested. I've used that word before. Congested area. Anyhow, So I'm going to now recalibrate for the G track. I don't really expect to find too much different. Now we need to push this further out. So this is actually a tiny bit over now, so I'll just slack this off. That's interesting that it's got a fair bit of relief in this on the bass side. Let me just check this. I had a fair bit of relief in here when I checked this. Yeah, it's not a ton though. So yeah, it's going to be a fairly flat leveling beam in that case. Okay, so now I'm going to do the G track, and again, each time I do this, it tells me a little bit more, or a little bit about that part of the radius as it comes this way. Now I'm going just a little bit. I probably don't do more than ever do more than an inch backwards and forwards, and I'm obviously also going from side to side to sort of spread out the effect of this beam over the radius. So what do we know? Well, yeah, we're definitely on a low. So low on the 5th and the 7th now, as is, so definitely low up here as well, and a little bit low here. So 5th, 7th, and 10th, I think, but not too bad. I'll just do it a little bit more, and then check the G track for play. Also, I think what I'll do is I'll just allow the beam to work a little bit on the transition part here, and I can see that what it's doing is it's just taking a little bit more off these frets here as it goes across that area. But I've no real idea how these frets got the way they are. That's good. I'm hearing a tiny bit of swing. No, that's Wayne's World code for something else. Hearing a tiny bit of something down here on the B, so I'm just going back a step. It's not quite as clear, these notes, as the G or the high E, so I'm just going to reconsider what's going on here. Now, of course, the amount that you do this and how long and so on is very much a matter of experience and feel, and I can't communicate it easily to somebody just in words on a video or even in an ebook. Better. So yeah, it's one of those things that if you ever use this method, I really recommend that you don't consider it or think of it as a one-off go. You really need to be prepared to use the method quite a long time before you'll get comfortable with what it's doing. You'll get a result straight away the first time, but it's no guarantee that you won't have that sort of intuition about when to stop and when to carry on. Excuse me. And that's kind of important, because for a lot of people who have tried this method, I think one of the things that they can find is they can either go too far without realizing it, or they can think they've gone too far and get very freaked out and sometimes have to stop and perhaps not do enough, and so on and so on. So it's quite difficult to know. So it's it's more of a experience thing. I listened to quite a long rant by Jerry Rosa of Rosa String Works yesterday about fret leveling. So that low fret there just causing it to only the tiniest bit. I'm just going to give it a whiff more. Yeah, so it's an interesting sort of discussion. I think the only thing I really took from it was that he showed himself used, or he kind of critiqued people with their kind of millions of different tools that they think they need, and he basically pulled out 3 tools. The first one was leveling beam, a bit like my Crimson one, sort of leveling file on a piece of wood, about 5 inches long, I suppose. And the next one was a fret crowning tool, a bit like my offset one, only a simpler one with a little kind of curved thing on it. And the other thing was a piece of sandpaper, and he said that's the only things you need, and he's right about that. But a Reloved Guitars friend of kind of asked me what I thought about it, and I mean, he's right in what he says, that his main point was that what really matters most is that frets are level in relation to the nearby frets. So they don't have to be absolutely level all over the board. They just need to be level relative to the ones next to them. And you can achieve that perfectly well. In fact, I think his point was you can achieve that even better by having a short beam, because you're only considering a small cluster of frets at a time, than if you have a longer beam and you're trying to do a whole fingerboard at once. So that was quite interesting. Now, of course, I don't disagree with that at all. He's right. The reason I don't follow that method is because it doesn't do what this method does. Okay, I'm kind of, now what I'm looking at right this moment is I'm looking at, because I'm doing all these frets, I'm trying to find, is there any that are not having these crunchy bits taken away from them, and possibly this one here, number 3, is a bit low. So if I try and go lower on that to get rid of the crunchy bits, I'm going to make it lower, which then means it's fretting at the 3rd on the high E is likely, or it potentially will cause a choke out. So I have to decide whether I'm going to leave it as is and try and just maybe use a sandpaper 400 grit just to maybe smooth out as much as possible the little scratches while I can, or if I can't, then I just have to accept that's how they are and that's how they're going to stay. Now what I'm concerned about here, as you remember, is the sort of gouges on the ends of all of these frets, so I'm just sort of really looking to do that now. Obviously it still goes over the plateau at the end here, which isn't brilliant. So I can get to I've got to most of the fret ends and got rid of those grindy bits, but I'm not going to get to all of them because they are low, and I don't want to take so much fret metal away just if they're not actually right on in the line of fire. Because when we play, we're more likely to pull down on the bass strings like this, except if you do the thumb, you might pull a little bit this way. But these little gouges are so close to the edge on these, I don't think that's the end of the world, and certainly not worth taking the metal away. But I'm confident that most of the scratchy stuff will be gone by the time there's a little bit up there, but which I can't get to. Most of it will be cleared up by the time I've recrowned and polished out. It's amazing how little it takes to sound grindy. Okay, now this is me effectively setting this at the action we've currently got. Obviously all out of tune. And the question I've got now is, do we risk notice how smooth that tuning is now. Right, let's do it. I want to give the customer everything he asked for. So, going to get the electric screwdrivery thing. I'm going to take the action down. Oh, I'm just chuckling because I've left the car around the corner on a hill because Claire was in town today and the battery has drained. So that was not very clever, and she had to get a local Tavistock-y person to help. Very kindly stopped and helped her and gave her a bump start, and as the person was doing it, they promptly shorted a fuse on their car. Got Claire going perfectly happily, and oh right, okay. Fine. Well, I can always look at the other one for size, but I'm not sure I want to do it. Yeah, so she was off. No, there's a little bit too much of a gap, and I don't want to bulk it out either. Yeah, so she went off happy as a person who's been restarted, and the poor person had no choice. I think his wife in the car started calling the RAC for the AA, which I felt terrible when she told me. Anyway, I mean, you know, they did a really kind, what's that thing called? This is not what I want. They did a very kind help us out of trouble thing, Good Samaritan thing, and we're obviously very, very grateful for that. But I just kind of temptation to feel terrible about the fact that they ended up in trouble themselves. Not good. Now, I'm going to lay this guitar down on its case for a minute. That's perfectly fine. While I take care of this little bit of adjustment on here. And now this won't need much, I won't be aiming for much. So I said, let's limit it to half the original planned measurement. So half the planned measurement, it was going to be 0.6 on the treble end, which is up here, and 0.75. So let's go half, so we'll go 0.3. And I'm going to write this up because you lose track otherwise. So we cross that out and we go 0.3, and we'll go 0.4 on this end, slightly over half. But shall we? No, actually, you know what? Let's keep this simple. Let's do 0.3, and that gives it a slightly fractionally higher at the base end, which is fine. So we've got to take 0.3 off this, and then you would say to me, well, how the hell do you draw a line 0.3 mils? But you don't. So the secret of it is this: you get your thing and you pick a spot, and I pick the spot where first of all the high E runs over, but if there isn't a groove to get into it, do it where you can come dependably back to. So 7.33 on the bit just before, on the slopey bit. Anyway, what did I say now? 7.33. So I'm going to go there, and that's the treble end, and I'm going to go 7.33. And on this end, I'm going to go to the end of that bit as well, which I can I dependably find that each time? Well, not that easy, is it? But I'll try. 8.27. 8.27. Now if I take off 0.3 from each of these, target for this first one is 7.33. 703, and the target for the second one is 3 off, 7.97, really, being totally precise. So that would be my targets, and how I do it obviously is I take some material off the bottom by holding it and making sure it's running straight, and I take some material off the bottom like so, and to be sure of what I'm up to, I then measure again very quickly, and I go to here and I'm going 703, I'm at 722, so I've gone 0.1 already, so I can assume it's, for now I can assume it's done the same at the other end. What's critical is that it's got the correct lean to it. I want a 90 degrees bottom, so I'm going to keep checking that as well as the overall height. So bottom is square, bottom's a little bit off square on the far side. Let's check this one now, up to the edge there. That is coming up at, what's it coming? It's coming up at something completely different now. Up to the edge, please. Okay, it's come up 7. Dead on 7, that's fine, we'll live with that. And this one is coming up to 8.03, which is almost there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just does it need an adjustment? No, that's almost perfect. I'm going to just run it a little bit heavier on the base just to square that off, but I think that'll be my 0.3 mils of adjustment. Okay, it's a very small amount, but as you can see, I'm being extremely conservative, because the truth about this guitar is the action was low to begin with, and I have to be realistic with George and say, you know, we don't want to push it to being the same as an electric guitar exactly, because it will just, you know, it'll cost you in terms of tone. Now there's the other thing I didn't talk about here, but there was plenty enough break angle as well over the saddle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten up these a little bit just to hold the nut in place. Get this one in, the G and the D. Oh, hang on a minute. Okay, both in place, and then we'll get the other ones on. Oops, sorry. Now, what I'm looking for now is how well this sets up, as is. And whether this small adjustment downwards requires any adjustments or any further fret leveling. Okay, so that's us in the right place. Just give it a little pull. Oops. Goes the nut. I haven't kept an eye on the camera batteries or anything. Okay, so what have we got? We've got still a very low action. We went from we were on 2.5 on the bass side on the last fret, and we're probably closer now to yeah. Yeah, we're closer, just a little over 2, which is that isn't bad. I'm not sure you'd ever bend a string on an acoustic guitar across into the G track, but just in case you do, I'm going to take the same calibration as we had before, and I'm just going to do the G track a tiny fraction more in case it will just alleviate that beginning to choke. And it's sort of in the middle here that we want to, well, not the middle, around the 12th fret that, and just below it that we want to kind of focus on. And I think that's as much as I'm going to do. So a small reduction in the action. I think any further than that is going to be asking for trouble. Okay, fine. I think that's as far as we can realistically go with action adjustments, as far as I'd want to go in action adjustments. So we've achieved cleaning up of the grit, we've achieved a leveling of the parts here that weren't level. We have evened this out a bit, so we shouldn't have any problems there. So I think it's now time to re-crown it and get ready to polish everything out and ultimately put some new strings on, stretch them out. So these have seen the last of action. Time to get those off. I think I'm going to, well, I know for a fact I'm going to stick with this nut. It won't be a great outcome if I choose one that's a little thinner. It'll annoy me, and I'm sure it will annoy George. And having spent some time off camera widening the slots here and testing it out so it doesn't make any pinging or there isn't any friction, undue friction, then I'm confident this will perform perfectly well. So that's the executive decision. Of course, I also give all of this a clean once we've done the leveling. No, the crowning. So I'll show you the crowning bit first, and then I'll probably go off camera to do the sanding and polishing part because it's long-winded, and then I can watch something on the camera thing, that thing that's called internet, whatever. So up come the pegs, a little bit of a gentle wiggle to bring them up. This bridge is looking, wood-wise, it's looking extremely dry, so I'll probably add, give it a little bit of an oil as well, in a minute. Right, there's all our bits. Yeah, so that's an interesting discovery, isn't it, that the neck has this dip, and I can see it. I mean, I could see it when I looked at it in the bright lights. I could see it, so there's no getting around it. It has got this dip in it. Now we've got enough relief in the neck as it happens, but it's very small. So I'm going to prepare to have some adjustment when I get the new strings on, because I think I want to potentially add a tiny bit in. Now I measured it at. I wanted to take it down to 0.2, that was my thing, so, but I'm not sure if it's I don't know if it's actually at 0.35, but we'll have the, in other words, I may have got the measurement wrong, but I used the feeler gauge, so I'm not really sure I could have done. But let's just be standing by as a standard hex. Okay, so for the what you call them, those things, fret crowning. Now this is interesting because the fret crowning will do two important things now. Well, it'll do several, but one of the, it'll obviously recrown the frets and make them into more of a arch shape instead of the slightly flat shape that some of them will now be. But equally useful, it will help to tell me how much metal I took off the frets. I know how much I did, but it will confirm to me how much or little it was. And it will also reveal to me any of the marks on the fret that haven't been leveled out, and it will show me that pretty quickly as little black dots. So I'm going to use the small side of the thing here. Can you see? Yeah, you can see a couple of frets. So I'm going to just run it over here quite gently and see what I need to kind of gently reshape. And this one, the ends have been done a fair bit, not a fair bit, but a bit more, so there's a bit more time spent at the end. And I clean the surface of the file. This one, not much at all, and it's showing me no dings really. That's good. That one, we're sort of not much either because we're in the low spot here. This one barely nothing, so I'm not even going to go over it again. This one, a little bit more to do on this, but not too much. Okay, and so on and so on. So what I'm seeing is that it's not retaining any of that gritty, horrible stuff that was making a noise and grinding its way on the fret. So that's good that the leveling has, sorry, you can't see now, I'm so naughty. It's good that the leveling has taken care of that so far. And a couple of these frets have slightly flatter spots where they've needed a little bit more leveling, and so on and so on. But yeah, just the real finding about this guitar is that little fall away, you could call it. Now some people sort of deliberately put a slope of frets into their fretboards at the end where the neck joins the body, because typically a lot of players find that the joint area between, even on a Les Paul or an acoustic, the joint area where in the case of the electric, where the neck goes into the body and gets glued in, can be congested. One bit can be, well, one bit doesn't respond to the truss rod, this bit, and the rest does, so you get this kind of what I call the hammer and sickle, the handle of the sickle here, not the hammer, handle of the sickle here, and the curved bit there. And so sometimes on the Les Paul, I am spending time trying to just gently ease out this knuckle-shaped bit, congested bit here. This one is, oh, and sorry, on an electric guitar like that, people like to put in what they call a fall away to try and, if they don't have any other technique, they'll put a fall away in to hopefully overcome this congested bit here. So in a way, this has got a natural, because of the way the extension is pushing into the top there, it's got its own built-in fall away, although it's not technically required when I am leveling something, because this method of leveling sort of carves the clearance you need into that. And I've tried to do it a little bit with this guitar here, but it is just a little slightly bit unusual. Now these I'm not going to really have anything to do on them because we didn't touch them at all with the file, the leveling file. So that's the recrowning done, and the next stage is the dreary cleaning up of everything. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to clean off as much as I can the marker pen, just so while I'm at this stage I just clean up enough of or as much as possible of the frets, and then after that I'll mask it all off mostly off camera, and then I'll get ready to sand it out. To do that, I'm going to go through a series of paper grits from 400 to 600 to 1000 to 1500, and then switch over to micro mesh papers. I'm going to run from 1500 on the micro mesh, which nobody seems to be able to tell me whether that's exactly the same as 1500 on the papers, but either which way it's close. From there, so 1500 on the micro mesh, 1500, 1800, 2400, 3200, 3600, 4000, 6000, 8000 and 12,000. So it's a good spread of micro mesh, and that brings it up to a pretty good shine. Okay, so that's my sort of initial clean off. Obviously it's going to get dusty again when I finished sanding it off, and of course I'll take off the tuners as well to get a bit of cleaning into this headstock, because it looks tired when it's got loads of dust on it, so there's nothing better than getting a bit of a clean up. So I'll do all this stuff off camera, most of that stuff, and I'll come back to you when this has been sanded and polished. See you in a minute. Okay, we're back. Got to put the tuners on, got to glue the nut on. Everything's polished and cleaned, oiled, everything's sanded and polished out. So we've now got ourselves a nice looking guitar. Let's just try and put this here where I can see you can see me. Let's go a bit further out, and that's better. Right, interestingly, all of these tuners were loose, which is quite common, I suppose, over time. What happens is typically the finish kind of dries and thins out, becomes thinner, and then it only takes a tiny fraction of that shrinking for the nuts on here to go slack. But that's what happens, so it's quite common. But it's always a good idea to check and tighten. I said the word again. Yeah, so I've just been listening on the radio thing, YouTube. They're naming the person who was allegedly doing the bad thing with a young person and money involved. But apparently, what's good is what's good if it's correct. The police have said there's no case to answer, so it's not. But I mean, and the person in question is now it's checked into a clinical care facility because they're so emotionally, mentally upset or damaged, which is pretty horrible to know. Although, of course, I'm not. If they did something bad and abused power, I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying for anyone to be in the media glare, I suppose, is pretty awful, and people crave it, and then it seems to damage so many people so much of the time. Anyway, I'm glad I'm not in the media spotlight. Oh please, make me famous. So, where are we? We are July 2023, and I've been keeping my eye on the progress of the Ukrainian counter-offensive. There's a bird upstairs, and the sort of tension that's been, a little bit of tension building up about the pace at which the NATO/West is or isn't giving weapons to Ukraine, or can't go on doing it forever. I actually think whoever speaks like that, I think it was Ben Wallace, probably isn't a great idea to speak about it in those terms, because it's the kind of quote-unquote division that our friend Vladimir Vladimirovich thrives on, off, on. So I would, and also I genuinely don't think that the idea that there is an alternative in this situation, I think, is very naive. I mean, I know that pro-Putin people think the alternative is that Russia should keep the lands it has annexed, inverted commas, but I can't see any situation in which that's an acceptable recompense for somebody who invades a neighbouring country and kills tens, hundreds of thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of its own people. So I don't, no matter what, people go Biden this and Zelensky that and Bilderberg and Vanderberg and whatever they name as the kind of reasons why the West is this and the West is that. None of those things add up to how it's okay for a Russian autocrat to invade a country like that. And so I just don't listen from that point, because there's no value. There's nothing really to discuss. Because I guess those people who are critical and they go, well, yes, but, and the West this, and NATO expansion that, and whatever. And you say to them, well, even if you're right, which you're not, and Prigozhin himself said explicitly in his broadcast a couple of weeks ago, or during or around about his mutiny time, he said so himself that the idea of a NATO planning to attack, or even representing any direct threat to Russia, was just made up. He's quite right, and if anyone should know that, he'll know that. But anyway, people who agree with that. I mean, I had somebody made a comment on the video a little while back and said, their comment was, yes, but, and then they sort of said a whole load of stuff that went from, well, it was not conspiracy exactly, but in a way it was every sort of conspiracy theory you could collate together, and it's just go, okay, so given all of that, then even if the royal family were lizards and the Bilderberg group and the Kennedys and the Rothschilds and the whatever you're saying, even if, right, given, let's imagine that, how does that still make it okay to destroy a peaceful neighbouring country? It just doesn't. In any way, shape, form, to invade and destroy it and to go at it in a genocidal attack. Just soz. There's just no way, even if the Queen was a lizard, and even if David Icke was this, and whatever that idiot Alex Jones was that, blah blah blah. Still okay. So what I want to say to them is, so what you're saying is it's okay to invade your neighbour and kill their people and bomb civilians and destroy tower blocks and people in a children's theatre and so on and so forth. And the answer that they have to give you is either yes, it is okay and it does make it right, or it doesn't. But they never give you that answer, because how can anyone make that right? And they just go into more conspiracy discussions, because it's the only bearable, comfortable way of dealing with that direct question. So, George, important thing here, right? When you're putting strings on, I'll show you on the next one, but keep an eye in a minute on my method of stringing. And I'll talk it through as I go. So what I do for all strings is as follows. I get the string, make sure the ball is right up under the bridge plate as close as you can. It's a very weird one to describe, but you know that. And so I tend to put the string all the way through first, make sure it's up, make sure it's kind of taut, and I grab it at the first fret and I pull it back 1 fret, hold it there, and then I start winding. And the idea is to hold the held one so it doesn't move and lead it over the floppy one the first time round. So over, keeping this side of the string taut, and then as the floppy one comes through, hoik it up and then push the held one underneath this time so it goes below the floppy one, and then you're ready to cut that excess bit off. So there we have it, and I'll do it one more time with the G. I'll talk through one more time. So this is on the opposite side, pull back 1 fret, this time I clamp with my thumb, even if I was winding by hand. Oh, wait a minute, I'm on the wrong bleeding one. So, hold it down. Come on. So, wind it round, keeping the held one held, but I tend to pick it up like that. Guide it over the loose one. As it comes round, I tend to lift the loose one up, bend it out of the way, and then with my finger, keeping it all taut so it doesn't come off the peg or anything, and direct the held string underneath that time round. Now this is probably going to go round one more time. Didn't need to, but I didn't pull it through far enough, I guess. But it only needs 1. I'll chop that off in a minute. So yeah, so that one above and 1 below sort of thing, it can't be less than that, particularly on the plain strings. If you do it less than that, what will happen is you could get slippage. But if you do it at least 2 and a tiny bit more on the plain strings, it'll be enough to hold them without any extra material being on there. Finally, low E. Okay, so what we'll do after this is we'll stretch out the strings, and then we'll check the, we'll make a check of the relief to make sure it's where I want it. So pull back 1 fret, start winding, hold it tight, work it over as it comes round. If you want to, hoik up the leftover, out of the way. Send it under. Obviously then it comes round, and you've got to get it in a decent position to chop off the excess, which is a way of keeping it all tidy so you don't get your fingers stabbed on anything sticking out. So the closer you can cut it, the better, like so. And that is the restringing done. There's a little bit left on there. I've broken my promise to the world of stringing. There you go. So, string packaging out of the way. So now what I want to do is to pull all the strings and bed them in. When I do that, I tend to hold. Maybe I might be able to see it. I tend to, at this end, I tend to grab it like that, and with my palm hold down the peg so it doesn't come popping off, or if it's tending to, you can press it down again. And I do that for all the strings and just get them seated nicely, and any, like I say, any movement in the peg is taken care of. And check it all again. That's it, push anything in that needs pushing in. Right, and we're sort of ready to get first tuning now. there's my beautifully tuned string. But what I'm going to do now, just clean this sweat off there. What I'm going to do now is stretch them all. And the thing about stretching is really important, is if you want your guitar to play and stay in tune, you've got to do this. Well, there you go. You've got to do this first before you start playing, and that is to stretch out all the built-in slack that's stored in these strings. And I chopped the top of my thumb off, or the pad of my thumb off, the other day with a pair of extremely sharp scissors. So at this point in time, I'm sort of going to push the tip of my thumb and avoid that bad bit, but this will, if you like, bleed out the slack that's built into the strings. Don't ask me how or where it's built into the strings. We only all know that it is, and that it will keep going out of tune for its, for as long as it likes, unless we take care of this, take it out of its hands. So you'll hear now straight away how much detuning we've got. If that's a couple of tones, that string alone could have leached out detuning cent by cent over months, if not years. See that ping? I'm going to get my file out, prepare, that's the red one, 26. I'm going to prepare to look at that D slot. Over here. The G's moving fine. So each one of those strings has gone at least a tone, or certainly the wound ones. And the point being, is, I guess, is that those strings could shed all of that detuning power over months of play, because it's only going to do it a little bit at a time, and it's not going to do it all at once. It's going to do it at a few cents a time. So one detuning of one string for a few cents of pitch will mess up your playing. And if you think that you could get 100 detunings out of one string, and then you've got 6 strings, that's 600 or more detunings, enough to put your whole guitar out of tune, just because you only have to detune one string for it to sound like a mess. And so there's the potential for hundreds up to thousands of detunings if you don't do all this stretching first. Lovely sounding. Now what I've got here is, as you can guess, I've got me a what's this grade? Oh, I can't tell. 400 or 600. 600. What we've got is bone nut slots, which I can take care of in a minute. But let's continue with the stretching, and afterwards I'll pay a little bit of attention to the bone slots. Now this is one of the things I don't really have to do so often when I use. Is that a bit of damage? That is a bit of string damage on the fingerboard. So this is a clue to what's happened to this fingerboard in the past. Look at it there. Dun, dun, dun. See that gouge or a scratch or whatever it is? It looks like a string's been gouged into there. Kind of difficult to see how, but it's just a little bit of evidence of the former life somewhere. Could be factory. I mean, the fact that this guitar has come out. Now the question I forgot I was going to talk about, but I have no idea really how to. Well, I can't prove anything, but the question that you'd have is this bend in the neck here, this fold or crimp in the neck. You know, did it happen in the factory? Has it always been like that, or has it changed all of a sudden? And interestingly, I'm going on what Tim said, that something changed suddenly. Now, while we have to agree that somebody's description of it might not be the best guide to what happened, what's important is that Tim and George, I think, both observed that something changed. So, for all I know, something may have given way there. At the point at which they observed something not working right. So see how close we are now to stabilizing the tuning. It's very nearly there. Probably do one more pull, stretch, and I've done more than usual with this, but let's see, that's about the fourth one now. So really making sure this stays in tune. And it's so worth doing, because getting your nut slots right, first of all, they're as free running as they possibly can be without any friction. And to that end, that's why I typically prefer to use Tusk, because it takes care a lot of the friction aspect with its being impregnated with Teflon and so on and so forth. But you know, that's a preference, and bone can be made to work perfectly reliably. It's just harder work for someone like me, for starters, because it's not quite as friction free. So you can hear tiny ping on the E, the A, and the D. The G is great. Right, I'm going to call that time on the stretching part. I'm looking at my first fret action. It's actually pretty good. What is it? Let's see if I can see what it is. I'm kind of hoping it's going to be exactly on the 0.3 mark, but it's actually a fraction more. So we've still got a little bit of room. I didn't take it down as far as I might have thought at this end anyway, so it might well be, give me a little... leeway in making adjustments. So I'm going to do that because I also, not only do I want the correct height, but I also, really importantly, I want the width to be right. Now, as soon as you do a slack off, if you're doing anything with the nut slots, you'll find that you're going to build in a little bit of slack again that you're going to want to take off. So as I'm going to do this one now, this is going to be on the 17. I'm sort of more concerned on the width of this slot more than anything, and it's kind of supposed to be leaning. Is it? No, actually this one's straight through, isn't it? There's me leaning it, but so because it's straight through, it's got to turn at some point. That's good. The question is, have I got the action right? Close. Oh. 17. I think that's good. Then we come on to the B. The B is the blue one. out, and it wasn't having any pinging problems, so it's only going to be a tiny bit of height difference here that I'm after. That's minuscule. And basically you've got to just keep a steady hand and not go too far with the depth. It's really hard to avoid overcutting it. That's good. I'm going to leave it there. And then the high E. Try and just move it to one side if it will stay there. I think I'm happy with where that is. Now here are the ones that are a little bit more troublesome, because they're going to be a little bit sticky in terms of the width. So we've got basically the right depth there, and it's the width that's the issue. So we want to go first of all with a 26th. So I'm going to go downwards first, so I've got no risk of cutting the slot any lower, and I'm going to concentrate on trying to keep it wider, then a little bit around the edge of the slot, so hopefully that's okay. Often you won't tell until you get all the way through. Only when everything's done up. This one pinged a tiny bit before, so now with this one I'm going to go with the blue one at 36, and I'm going to concentrate on the width again more than anything. And for the sake of my sanity, I'm going to get a little bit of this 600 grit, and I'm going to use a blade folded up in this 600 grit as I shall do it with one sheet folded. I'm going to just use this as a fold over, so I can just add a tiny bit of width to the slot like so, because I really don't want to go any lower. I'm just concerned with width, so I can sort of work at the walls of the slot more than anything else. Now again, having slacked it off and tightened it up, we'll have a little bit of slack build back into it. So we are done, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, I'm happy with the relief in that. I'm not going to add or take away any, because it's not broke, it's as it was. So I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to replace the truss rod cover, and then that's a lot. And we will see you tomorrow for Tim's Dave Gilmore, no, Mark Knopfler, I knew it was one of them, MK. I'm only saying Dave Gilmore because I did one of those recently. Actually, it wasn't a Fender. It was a parts caster, courtesy of what started out, if I recall, as a Harley Benton, but it was made to look and feel like a Gilmore. Yeah, so that was tomorrow, and then we'll see George for collection on Thursday. Right. Lovely. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. It's a bit of an unorthodox one for me, but it's got a little bit of everything. But one of the things that's really nice is absolutely cleared up all of that stuff. There's possibly a tiny little scratch on the edge of a couple of these frets right at the edge, but actually, to be honest, I can't even see that. So I'm actually telling lies, there isn't any. It's done, and it's a super low first fret action as well. Thank you for watching. Oh, I'll give you a little flyby, I suppose. Ta-da! Lovely, lovely, clean. Oh wow, look at that. Swing really low. Stop saying that. Swing, that's definitely from another era. Strange neck, strange joint. That's from another era. Anyway, there we are. The EJ200 Epiphone. Beautiful sounding, big jumbo thing.